Welcome to House Einstein Podcast 51. I am Osman Parvez with House Einstein, and with me is Hamish Crabb.
Hello, hello. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for joining us. Our mission at House Einstein is to help you make a smarter real estate decision, but for purposes of this podcast, our attorneys have advised us to tell you, dear listeners, that this podcast is entertainment. If you are seeking legal advice, financial advice, real estate advice, please contact your appropriate professional. And for real estate advice in the state of Colorado, if you're in Denver or Boulder or Fort Collins, or if you're in the mountain communities that are within a few hours drive of these major cities on the Front Range, that is our market. And you are welcome to reach out to us directly. You will find us at houseeinstein.com. But for the podcast, please enjoy this entertaining. Yeah, that's what this is. Absolutely.
So we hope to get a few good yucks, and maybe you'll learn a thing or two on the way, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Although I don't know if this is a podcast that will have a lot of yucks, but it is intended as humor. So this particular podcast, we're going to move things around a little bit. And instead of making you wait for the core topic, our number one topic, we're just going to lead with it instead. And that is the segment we typically call Tell Me Something I Don't Know, our topic du jour. And in this particular case, that topic is all about the mentors and role models that we have experienced in directing our lives to this particular moment and into the mission of what we do for work. And it's inspired by someone who's very close to us who, well, recently passed away, and seeing the impact that person had on so many people and reflecting on that, and including myself, the impact on me, has caused me to think, well, maybe we should just talk about how mentors and role models have influenced us in what we do, specifically in real estate. So that's our chief topic, and as always, we're going to talk about market conditions. We're going to do a little bit of shameless self-promotion. That's our buyers and sellers who are out there in the market looking. And then we're going to talk about a few notable sales, all of which this time are in the city of Boulder. These notable sales are designed, our discussion is designed to help educate you about market conditions, but we'll go into some detail. We can't talk about active listings. We reserve our newsletter to discuss that. Active listings, there are rules for when and how we can talk about those, and the newsletter that is to our clients and prospective clients is our workaround so that we can share thoughts on active listings. But sales of the week, these are closed deals. And with closed deals, we can really go in depth and share that publicly without needing that workaround. And that should be enough to fill about an hour or so. What do you think, Hamish?
Oh, yeah. I think... we'll see how we do. Doing the Tell Me Something I Didn't Know up front, I wonder how it's going to affect. Because, usually we do a little warm-up with the other segments, and I'm curious to see how it affects conversation and everything. I think it should be pretty good.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you're just here for the notable sales, in which case you can click forward. But when I work with somebody, I really want to know, how did they get here? Why did they choose what they're doing? And how does that relate to what I'm looking for a service provider? And as I often tell my clients, you should choose to work with people you trust, people that not offer you value for the services, for your money, offer you valuable services. Their value proposition is strong, but also people that you feel have integrity and reflect your values. And you're probably going to be much, much happier in the real estate transaction process, buying or selling. And I think that same principle applies to your investment advisor, your attorney, your tax advisor.
Just people you work with, right?
People, actually, that's the most important piece, because mostly we, other than family and friends, we spend so much of our waking hours working with people. And if you don't feel alignment with those people, with who you are, you should really find a different group of people to work with.
Yeah. All right.
And if you're in the position to hire, which I frequently have been, you choose people that reflect those values to hire. So
Big time.
there you go. Not to sound too I don't know, lecture on this topic, but it's something I spend a lot of time thinking about. So let's go into the Wayback Machine and talk about those that have guided us on the road of life, the shoulders we stand on, and do it in honor of this recently passed person. I'm not going to mention any more about this person because it's not our place, what their specifics are, but they were close to the House Einstein team, and the impact of their passing definitely was very significant, not just for the family, but also for a huge community of people. Mm-hmm. So, first chapter in family in the mentors and role models is a chapter. Yeah, I'll just lay it out. We're gonna break this into 4 different groups. We're gonna talk about family and friends. We're gonna talk about teachers and professors, or in other words, academic influences. We're gonna touch on professional influences, and then we're gonna wrap it up with non-personal, meaning that people who have influenced us, but we actually don't know them personally, but their work and their lives have dramatically impacted ours. So those are the 4
public figures for that category. If it
You're
helps
calling it public figures?
If it helps make it make a little more sense.
Yeah, I don't know if they're always public, but okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
But yeah, sorry, carry on.
No, that's just wanted to break it into the sub chapters. That's how my brain works. It just wants to bullet everything. Like, what are we talking about right now? Well, this is what we're talking about. Mm. And we're going to launch in with the family and friends, or family or friends. What's your, do you want to jump in, or do you want me to start?
Oh, I totally want you to warm this up. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
I mean, the largest influence in well, let me back up. I guess one of the earliest influences on the family and friends docket was a recently retired New York City police detective named Edna. And Edna was my second mom in New York City up until the age of maybe 3. Learned my ABCs from her. She befriended my mom and dad when they first got an apartment in a neighborhood in New York City called Flushing. And I think the sub-neighborhood might be Fresh Meadows. I don't really know much about this. It's just what I've heard growing up. But she was a huge influence, so much so that when my parents moved to upstate when I was this toddler, I wanted to move back to New York City. Not for any reason other than for this second mom and the daily interactions I had with her, but super strong female, and first police detective in the New York City police force that was a woman. And and I think that started that sort of set the seed for why I've always had such appreciation for strong women in my life and in my circles of friends, and as partners. It's something I have a lot of respect for, and it probably began with Edna. And I know you've had some strong women in your life too, Hamish.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, my mom raised me and my 2 brothers, pretty much completely single. So it was, we talk about work ethic a lot, and I think I got a large majority of that, and also kind of how I view the world and communicate with people through her. She was always open and kind of shared everything as it happened. It wasn't really, a kid should or shouldn't hear this. It's like it's happening to the kid, so the kid's going to hear about it and learn how to process it. And I think it ultimately made me a lot better off because of that. Yeah.
So she didn't shield you from much?
No. Which, yeah, I'm super thankful for. Everybody that I know that's been shielded seems to have more issues than not, so,
I was just in Longmont in Prospect looking at a house for clients and ran into one of my friends, and she has some teenage children, and I joked with her that they're almost out of the nest, and she looked at me and she goes, maybe if they ever leave. I'm like, wow, you might be protecting these kids until they're 30 in today's day and age.
I mean, it's hard to get out at this point, but
absolutely. Yeah. Another role model for me, and I kind of want to say obvious, but it may not be obvious if you don't know me and my backstory, but both of my parents were doctors in a small upstate New York town, and my mom chose not to practice and raised us, and had a lot of warmth and kindness for everything living, almost like St. Francis of Assisi levels of care for wildlife. I remember visiting in college, and she had taken to feeding crows, and the crows would literally tap at her window in the morning like some Edgar Allan Poe story, looking for breakfast, and that was her alarm clock. I'm like, what is going on in this house with all of these animals? But she always had a real sensitivity and very maternal and kind to everything in the world. So that was an influence, although some would say I don't have that, or maybe I repress that nature. But my dad was a practicing doctor in upstate New York, and still, I guess, sometimes practices in his retirement, semi-retirement. But I grew up going to house calls and working in his office. Maybe he was trying to keep me busy. I don't know how much value I added, but I remember going with him to house calls. He would leave me in the car while he tended to whatever doctor visits do. But it was from his role in Rotary to the house calls to people he didn't charge that didn't have money for medical care. And I saw that firsthand working in his practice. That service mentality to community started there, and something I very, very much feel defines how I think about the world, from my board positions with growing gardens and the Boulder Dairy to other activities I'm involved with that don't have monetary rewards at all, but I feel very strongly need smart, capable, and dedicated people to volunteer time to support, because they're just so important as part of the community. So that was the sort of, I don't know, primal imprint. There's some sort of imprint, right? Like that happens.
The nurture.
Not through lectures. I also want to add that, like, there were lectures about all sorts of things, but I didn't get lots of lectures about community service. I just saw by example, and I feel like the things you're not lectured about as a young person that you see your parents doing have way more influence than what you get lectured by,
right,
or lectured on.
It's the exposure as a whole, for sure. Yeah, and then on the same kind of page, my grandfather was kind of my father figure growing up, and I just talked on the phone with him a ton when I was a kid. I grew up, a country away, so never really in person, but he was always fantastic for bouncing ideas off of, and full of life experience. And the more I grow up and know about his past, the more I'm like, how did you get to do that, or how did you position yourself there and everything? And he's always a blast to talk to. So
he was sort of a deal maker, right?
Yeah, he was a lobbyist for Union Pacific for a number of years, and then managed a uranium mine in Wyoming, and did just tons and tons of different things. So really interesting guy, and grew up in like Wiggins, Colorado, middle of nowhere type of deal, and still had all that happen. So really cool. Yeah. And I guess it's teachers, professors.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
You want to move on? Let's move on from that. So that was our first subchapter. Let's talk about teachers and professors or other academic relationships. And for me, there's a few teachers that come to mind, and I'm hesitant to mention their full names because they didn't sign up for that. And I don't, I think we get, actually this podcast keeps growing, so I don't necessarily want to embarrass them in some ways, but I'll mention their initials. So lots of teachers in high school, right? Lots of teachers that had a pretty big influence on me, like U.S. history, AP U.S. history teacher. That was the first time I'd ever heard a teacher suggest that what you're reading in the textbooks may not actually be what happened. And he was a little conspiratorial about various things in U.S. history, but it definitely sparked my awareness and curiosity about what the real story was.
Yeah.
And learning all that U.S. history from that teacher, who's since passed. His name was Horrigan. But the other teacher that had such an amazing influence on me had nothing to do with math or science or history. It was in music. And it was a chorus director named Mr. Griffith. And Griff, as we used to call him, just massively increased my appreciation for choral music. I took voice lessons with him. He was the director for the music of various musicals that the high school put on, and it was just profound. And one of the things that, not just in music, but so I grew up in upstate New York, which is a very conservative place, particularly in the late 80s and 90s, throughout the 80s and into the 90s. And it turned out, and I'll never forget this, and I feel like this is important to mention, by junior year, there were rumors that were washing through the student body that Griff was gay. And it was sort of shared in this sort of conspiratorial tone, like, can you believe he's gay?
Yeah,
as students do, right? Like, it's such a salacious rumor that he might be gay, and he was the first openly. Well, he wasn't actually out. He was, because this is upstate New York in that time period.
Oh yeah.
But basically, he ended up outed by the student body, and I remember. The conclusion I reached was, okay. Like, it was the first time reality and sort of the fear around homosexuality came into my visible world. And immediately all of the upbringing around, homosexuality being a sin or wrong in any way, shape, or form went out the window for me. Because this person had been so influential in such a positive way for so many people. And the thought, I distinctly remember the thought occurring like, okay, so he's gay. And today it sounds so silly to even have that contrast, but I want to rewind the clock to the 80s and early 90s, where the majority of people that were gay were in the closet. And it was the first, and his influence was so positive and powerful and kind. There was never any hint of any sort of impropriety of any kind in any way, shape, or form. And he just was a really unique and very powerful human being that gave so much of himself for so little pay. I mean, the amount of money teachers made in that era was ridiculous.
Yeah.
He even would take us on field trips to musicals in New York City, and it was really a big
really cool.
deal. So he died recently. He died last year, and we just had a sort of a big event in the community to celebrate his passing, which was held in Provincetown, Massachusetts, on the Cape. And I couldn't attend, but I watched it, and it was very, very moving. And so many people, just like with our friend passing who inspired this podcast topic, just massive outpouring of love and appreciation for the impact that this person had on so many young people.
When we're talking mentors, because like my mental model of a mentor is somebody that you kind of check in with at least, on a semi-frequent basis and kind of discuss like more of a philosophical point of view, but then also how you do things? Or are we looking at this from kind of like a who inspired you standpoint?
I mean, it can be both.
Okay.
So, I mean, and in some ways, I think that if you try to hang the label of mentor on someone, they may not want it.
Right.
They may not want the responsibility. Like, if someone were to call me and say, Osman, I'm 22 years old, I just got in the business, I could really use a mentor, I would say I really appreciate that, but I don't have the capacity to take on the role mentor. But in terms of hiring somebody, right? Like, I've hired you and you've been an amazing team member. I'm continually trying to show you other aspects of the business and expand your worldview and knowledge and skills in a mentoring role. Like, my job is not just to tell you what to do and make sure you do it right.
Right.
And I think that, so in terms of who's a mentor, it could be your boss, it could be somebody who just massively influenced you, like Griff did for me, or parents have done. And how do they actually go about doing it? That's a big deal. So mentors and role models, in my mind, is not somebody who wears the hat of mentor. It's somebody who does the work of mentoring, whether or not they wore that hat.
Formal label or not, right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And I'll contrast that. I'll contrast that for a minute, Hamish. So here's the real contrast. When I first moved to Colorado and we were relatively new agents and we worked at Remax, they assigned a mentor for you. And I don't know what the financial back end of that was. Maybe there was some sort of split that was shared with the senior agent. But I will share with you that person had zero interest in mentoring.
I was going to say, like, is it just a shoehorned type of deal or?
Zero.
Yeah.
Negative interest in mentoring. And it became really obvious and clear from the first meeting. We had like one 20-minute meeting, and I'm like, this guy doesn't want to mentor me at all. And yet... throughout
the course, don't reach out to me if you have any questions. Don't
call me. I just, don't bother calling. And it was horrible. And I was like, well, this is really, artificial attempt at mentoring. And I've had many clients and older colleagues, especially when I was younger in the business, that not just were like the business relationship itself resulted in a lot of mentoring. And
by like incidents, right, or kind of just by
education.
Proximity. Yeah.
Right. Like there's a client who's now once again a client who's shopping to buy right now. We'll talk about him in our shameless self-promotion segment, what he's looking for. But he was one of my first big deals in Colorado, larger transaction size. And it took 3 years for us to find the right house. And every single time we would go into a house, he would talk about what's right and what's wrong and point out things that I just wouldn't have seen otherwise. And this is why when people are like, well, I can sell a house, anybody can sell a house. Like, well, that's all true, but do you have 30 years of investment due diligence on real estate assets to talk about, residential real estate assets? Because that's what he was bringing to the table. And I was really, I just took it in like a sponge. And that wasn't, he didn't sign up for that. He just shared that because that's what you do with people that are younger and less experienced if you have a healthy container in the relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's awesome being able to work with him now. He's a lot of fun as a client. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he's funny too. That's true.
Yeah, super.
That's very true. So more time on Griff than I thought. Let me hit a couple of others.
Good.
And
No,
on
you're
from
good.
Teachers and professors. So I had a amazing Calc 1 and Calc 2 professor at Siena College when I attended my undergrad, and she just could see that I had the brains to do it, but maybe not the, discipline.
Wherewithal.
I didn't have the discipline, particularly with early morning classes, and it's sort of laughable. Like early morning, 8:30. Really? That's morning. Like today, I start my day at 4:30, but back then, 8:30 was really hard for me to get my teenage brain moving in the morning, and she really wouldn't let me slip through the cracks. And she but she encouraged me in so many ways to just finish the program. And then I made the mistake of taking her Calc 2. So I did okay in Calc 1. I think I got a B or something. And then Calc 2, I decided to sign up for her summer class, not knowing there were 2 people in the class.
Oh, geez.
Me and another student.
and that's
she, there's no hiding.
Yeah.
When there's 2, you are paying
you're getting a tutor
attention.
at that point,
You are getting 100% tutoring.
Yeah.
If I was late, she would call me, be like, "Are you coming to class?" I slept in. Sorry. It didn't matter. It was so one-on-one, and of course I got an A+ because she wasn't going to let me fail on anything.
Yeah.
There's no way. She really cared.
Yeah.
And I remember. So that's Dr. K. I'm going to leave her full name out. But she had a bumper sticker on the back of her Subaru. And I distinctly remember this bumper sticker because it said, "Subvert the dominant paradigm." And subvert the dominant paradigm, exactly, your facial expression was exactly how I reacted to it. Was like, what does that mean? And I spent a lot of time thinking about what that meant. And in fact, even now, decades later, my memory is still pretty fresh about seeing that. And then looking at that bumper sticker next to who she was as a person, they were known, her and her husband had been known for bulldozing their lawn and planting wildflowers.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And being sued by the town or the neighbors trying to get rid of the wildflowers and put the lawn back, and ending up in some big newspaper. And I want to say it might have been like the New York Times or Newsweek or something, and starting a fund to preserve the wildflowers. Like they had been that controversial, and she was like an old hippie, right?
Yeah.
In fact, I remember asking her about the hippie movement, and she said, "Osmond, we never called ourselves hippies.
Yeah.
We called ourselves freaks." And I'm like, okay, all right.
I mean, that's subverting the dominant paradigm. If anything, Especially tearing up the lawn. Yeah. I mean, you can
in that
Colorado, that's celebrated now, right? Like,
right.
Yeah.
Today, like,
It's a
people are
selling
happy
feature.
to see, yeah, xeriscaped, non-lawn. Why are you growing grass and wasting water? But back then, it was unheard of. And so she very much, another one of these teachers, right? So this is like a theme that are asking their young people to think for themselves and question reality and question the way things are. So Dr. K had that influence on me, and also didn't give up on me for Calc 1 and Calc 2. And then the last academic I'll mention, Dr. W. He was a biologist, and I studied animal behavior with him for many years in various seminars. Ended up being a very good friend and definitely a mentor in his approach to taking care of students and caring about what they're learning, and also questioning the world all around, and encouraging young people to question the world, not just shoving answers at them and teaching for the class or the test.
Such the status quo these days, yeah.
Taking the care to help people actually get educated, that was what he was all about. And I guess at some points in my career, I've had some regret for not pursuing animal behavior and the work he did, but I always appreciated, and also his role in service. So he moved into administration very reluctantly, later ended up in politics in the town, got on the school board, got his buddies on the school board, I think he ended up as mayor of the town. And then eventually there was something that happened and he's out. He's not active, I don't think, in local politics where he lives. But I really appreciated that, because when he expressed it to me that he really didn't want to do it, but he felt like it was his duty to move beyond his own self-interest and move to service to the community. And that service above self is actually the motto of Rotary. And it's something that has resonated with all of these mentors. These are people that care way beyond their own personal gain, and in any reasonable sense, right? Like these teachers that won't let you sleep through a class, and they're getting paid whatever, $40,000 a year.
Right.
That is something. That is not about the $40,000. That is not a transactional relationship. That is a community caring and service-based relationship. And so that is very much at the core of what drives our work at House Einstein.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big reason that people say that teaching is the most noble profession, and I really agree with that. Honestly, at some point, I'd love the opportunity to teach in my later years if it's a possibility. Yeah, it's funny you had the animal behavior teacher, and you're thinking, like I didn't get into that. Same thing with who I was going to bring up. I'll do it, Mrs. R. She is an AP Environmental Science teacher, and I had her for like bio, advanced bio, and AP Environmental Science, and I mean we just got along like a house on fire. And she was always a little disappointed I didn't end up doing anything in the environmental science or anything for client, because she was like, "You've got the personality, you could probably actually make a difference." And so it's kind of maybe one day I'll go back, but yeah, we still email and catch up, and kind of are pretty active, which is really, really nice to see. And yeah, she was just wicked, extremely caring and supportive, and as human as it gets for a teacher. A lot of them kind of maintain this like professionalism or facade veil, and she was always extremely professional, but also treated us like young adults, and gave us grace when it was needed or deserved. And I think, yeah, we had a really, really nice, the whole class as a whole. Yeah, she was wicked.
What grade was this?
I mean, bio was freshman, then I had her advanced bio junior, and then senior year was AP Environmental Science. So
cool.
Most of my high school. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Hamish, you're very vital in your role here at House Einstein. So I'm not trying to encourage you to seek greener pastures, but there's no reason that your core skill sets aren't transferable to other industries, and
down the line,
serving the environment and sustainability and working towards a better world is not a bad thing. We just do it one-on-one with clients, and helping them be smart about what they're doing, and hopefully choosing things. I mean, I frequently am bringing up sustainability and
100%, right, in the showings and everything. You're like, well, you could insulate that,
Right.
Top of mind is like, how do we And it's funny how hand in hand it is, but it seems the more, eco-friendly you go around your home, the lower your kind of overhead gets as well when you increase your insulation and efficiency and everything. So it makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is a topic for another time, but the part I just feel like I have to mention this because it's so top of mind. Like this push for new.
Yeah.
Constantly build drives me crazy because it's totally in disregard of the embodied energy of all these real estate assets that have already been constructed.
Mm-hmm.
And when you whip out that wrecking ball and take out that foundation, you're removing concrete, wood, and
What
steel.
was it? Embodied carbon?
Yeah,
from the other podcast.
You're removing so much, and you're dumping it into a landfill, and all that energy and time and resources that past generations have put in are just getting tossed, and it's not good for the environment. But that's not our. So the other thing I firmly believe
Right.
is it's not my job to make the decision. It's my job to opine, and our clients tell us what they want to do, and if it's their money. And their time and what they want as a brand new house, we will 100% advise them on a brand new house. But it's with that personal, like, I wish we could get you into something older feeling. I definitely love historic homes.
Hey,
we recently have.
I mean, I'm guilty. I'm in this house and I'm like, ooh, I could do this, and this, and all these upgrades and stuff to it. And there's going to be a point, I think, with a lot of things where, it's going to have to happen. But using techniques that kind of minimize the damage are really important.
Well, how about we just acknowledge the impact of demolition?
Mm-hmm.
Construction is just so wasteful. But we're gonna move on from this before we get too sidetracked,
right?
And move into professional mentors and role models. And I could talk about a lot, okay? Because I've had a long time in the professional world. Starting in the investment banking world,
no kidding.
Investment research, equities research, environmental consulting companies, and then into the real estate brokerage world, which was rather an abrupt turn, but I've now been in this field for 20 plus years. And in the beginning, I had a few years where I needed to go back to the investment analysis world, and I found myself working for a company, serving, as they like to say, with this company in Denver that still exists called Republic Financial.
Yeah.
And I really forever will be grateful for that opportunity to my title was Associate Director of Capital Markets, but the guy I worked for was really, really smart, Dennis, and really driven. He was what I would call an entrepreneur, meaning that he is working within an organization to drive results. Mm-hmm. And the results were very high level. That's why he's repeatedly ends up in the C-suite of public companies. So working reporting directly to him and being his number one associate.
Yeah.
The other guys on the team would say whipping boy, but whatever.
Yeah.
It was like, it was constantly being asked to put together analysis and professional presentations, PowerPoints, spreadsheets, more analysis, get on this call. All of that was super useful, and his drive was impressive. But one thing I will admit to resenting was this one time he asked me to put together this really detailed analysis, and I spent like the better part of a couple of days working on this, burning the midnight oil too, working late. And eventually I brought it to him, like, here's the analysis. And I walked into his office, I handed it to him, and he took like 2 minutes to look at it. He goes, this is pretty good. And then while looking at me, dropped it into the circular file. And I'm like, really? Like, could you wait till I leave the room for you to recycle
Could you explain why I just did this at this point?
But he was very fastidious and hated
was it a haze
of all
or
kinds.
Like,
no, he just hated clutter. He was very anti-clutter. Like, you walked into his office, there was anything, all horizontal surfaces, empty, like a staged office. So he was just very fastidious. But
okay.
And everything ends up as a digital product anyway. I'm sure he would want to reprint it and all the rest of that. But I remember feeling frustrated. But the owner of that company is who I really wanted to talk about, the founder. And Jim was his name. He passed away last year. I attended his memorial. And Jim Pacell just took that company from nothing, from a copying leasing company, into being a really significant investment player. A large family office with multiple business divisions, including one that has a fleet of Airbus and Boeing commercial jets that they have out on lease right now, and attending so many meetings with him and his number one. Because as the whipping boy for capital markets, I was in every meeting. I was just blown away by their thoroughness and their kindness, but also their demandingness, right? Their high standards for investment decisions. So the way that company was set up was with originators who then needed to pitch these ideas to the principals. And the originators didn't really get paid real money unless the ideas got funded and eventually bonuses got paid out. And it was like a conflicted environment because of that. And I think they did it right. At the time, I felt like they did it wrong because it was always conflict in that structure.
Right.
But that conflict forced better thinking.
Right.
And I really appreciated how they structured it, how they took care of people that got sick in the company. And the fact the company is still going well after,
kind of speaks
the founder
volumes.
just passed away. But the company is now 30 plus years old, has phenomenal returns, and has treated the core group of people, including admins, very, very well over many decades.
Yeah.
So that's an impressive structure.
Yeah.
It does. It speaks volumes.
Somebody is at my door. Oh, everything's okay.
Heard the doorbell go, but
Yeah.
they can sell you.
That's my roommate's friend. All right. I think, we've got professionals, and I wrote down this name. It's more of a kind of teacher-professor thing. But I guess I was thinking of it as more of like a professional arc. But my photography teacher in high school, I don't remember his first name, but his last name was Costello. And super educated and super talented photographer, and took us basically from like A to Z through cameras, and we developed black and white film, and then went into color, and then digital, and all this through the class. And he really kind of taught me thoughtfulness and just a lot of the technical skills that kind of have brought me to where I am today, and was kind of like my stepping stone. And I think about him pretty frequently, and I've actually tried to get in contact with him a lot, but I haven't had the chance. And I heard recently he retired. He retired a couple years ago, but I just found out. So I'd like to get in touch with him and kind of be like, hey, your class, it went somewhere, and it took me really far. And I can also just recognize Ansel Adams from a mile away now, because we basically looked through all of the works of Ansel Adams. And he's a really good teacher. And then another kind of in the professional world is I'm going to shout him out, Nick Aarons. He's still very active and around, and he was a creative director for Maxar Technologies, and just kind of was a true mentor in the sense, like, I have Slack solely so I can hit him up on my computer and run things by him, or get like some design input or a book rec or something like that. But he's a really talented designer, and also a great friend. So he's done a lot of help as well, getting me kind of a little bit more polished as I go ahead in my professional career. Yeah.
I mean, it's those foundational teachers are just so essential to building from their skill sets. The way they teach you the critical eye is so important.
Exactly, and they kind of like foster that spark too, right? Where it's like, if you want to do something and you have a cruddy person, it kind of kills all the energy. But if they can keep that alive and help you keep that curiosity and keep that hunger, then that's the mark of a great person. So,
well, that curiosity and that hunger leads you to proficiency, and then eventually, if you stay curious and stay hungry, you go to mastery.
Yeah.
And because you've just spent so many hours asking yourself, how do I make this product better?
Mm-hmm.
How do I get these angles better? And you compare it to other people's work, and over, rinse, repeat, until you're putting out the quality that you are currently, which is
Thank you.
100% professional.
Thank you. Yeah. I gotta find Costello. See where he's at.
You should.
Yeah.
Send him a thank you note. Send him a card.
Mm-hmm. Got a lens.
All right, the last one.
Yeah.
I have one last one in this category that I want to mention, and I would be remiss because it is directly related to real estate. And that is my old boss at my first real estate company. So I had, left the investment banking, investment research world, and had been living on Nantucket, and stumbled into an interview with this individual who was a director for community sailing. And it turned out I wasn't a good fit for the role at community sailing, but I was a great fit for his real estate brokerage / investment firm. And I ended up getting hired by him to help the brokers put together market analyses and marketing materials, including video, and also, all sorts of random responsibilities to the brokerage. But mostly he wanted me to build financial models and help him put together a quarterly research report. The financial model was for a club I've talked about before, the Westmore Club on Nantucket, that is currently functioning. But I built the original financial model, and we used that model to raise the capital to build that club and then handle the requisitions for the construction. And he asked me to handle all of that, which was like, okay, and figure out how I would do it and make it up as I went along. And I got to create systems for accounting and controls and talk to really wealthy and successful people about memberships. I mean, there were so many different roles that I got to work on and
hats to wear.
Really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So many hats, so many skills to grow. And the core foundation of what is House Einstein today came from that brokerage, because his thesis was people spending millions of dollars on real estate assets in a resort market like Nantucket are used to professional advisors. And instead, when they run around with real estate agents, they're getting mom and pop level advice from people that don't have any analytical skills, don't think in terms of due diligence, can't help them evaluate the distinction between one property versus another other than their aesthetics, other than the very superficial analysis. And he really would go deep down the rabbit hole in terms, like I remember him asking me to put together a matched pairs analysis on all land sales throughout Nantucket's history on the MLS. And the reason was that the land sales, if they have no improvements on them, represent a pure asset transfer, and you can evaluate appreciation rates. And we would then compare like waterfront versus inland appreciation rates. The conclusion, by the way, and I'll just mention that since it took a couple of weeks to do that analysis.
It's still burned into you.
The conclusion was waterfront property is expensive to buy, but it appreciates at a faster rate than inland property. So if you have the ability to lock down waterfront, you should do it. And I applied that same thesis to Boulder, by the way. If you have the ability to lock down, if you have the ability to lock down open space views, open space access, surrounded by conservation easements, it's probably going to continue to appreciate at a much faster rate, but you're going to pay a premium to get in. And you should understand that you're paying a premium, but in the long run, it's going to play out really well for you.
That's a pro tip.
By the way. Waterfront on Nantucket, by the way, is not a great investment on certain locations that are not protected by the harbor, because the ocean is eroding Sconset and other parts of Nantucket. And some of these houses are really falling.
Yeah,
they're falling into the ocean. So despite all the engineering, there's very little they can do. And with sea level rise continuing to go up and stronger storms, I'm not sure that's so as they say in the investment world, the past is not the future. Your results may vary, i.e., please don't sue me.
History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, type of deal.
Well, it in some ways, but
not as applicable.
Investment marketing is all about cherry picking time frames, and for sure you can cherry pick most of Nantucket's history when it comes to waterfront, but don't disregard what's about to happen or is happening with climate change and storm strength.
Yeah, no kidding.
So Alan, that was for you. I hope you're listening to this podcast. I deeply appreciate you basically injecting the mission of House Einstein into the DNA of House Einstein. Comes from that real estate brokerage that no longer is there. It was called Windwalker. But the goal of helping people make smart decisions is what is that's our moral compass at House Einstein. That's our mission. That's what we care about. And all of that comes from you asking me to help our brokers better advise the buyers and sellers. And once I saw the opportunity, I'm like, well, this makes so much sense. I just didn't want to do it on Nantucket. I wanted to do it in Boulder.
There's I can't remember the podcast episode, but there's an episode where you discuss why Boulder and how you ended up here. But and just before we move over, Osman, you are inherently a mentor, right? We work extremely close together. You're a professional. You've got years and years of experience, life experience, everything. you're there. I just, I work so closely with you. We're on this podcast, so I'm not gonna like sit there and do like a whole bio, but
you
mention,
don't need
right?
to do it on me.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. I'm doing my best, and in 20 years, if you're no longer with House Einstein, you're welcome to. You
crash on the
reflect back
couch
and see if I had some impact. Well, you can crash on the couch too. And I will mention the crash on the couch piece. I'll come back to Alan briefly.
Oh yeah.
So I was not very, and I hope he hears this, but I was not very nice on exit. Once I realized I wanted to move to Boulder, I basically gave them 2 weeks notice. And it came on the heels of a performance review, and that performance review was so... It wasn't delivered very well. I'll give Alan a little bit of criticism there, 25, 30 years, whatever years later. But at the same time, he did not hold it personally. And he has continued to be an advocate and a friend despite me leaving his company. And that is one of the lessons
that's huge.
Of choosing who you work with, that even in what I think of as I probably should have exited better, given them more time, 2 months, right? Not 2 weeks. And he still, took that loss of a resource for his company very well. And he has continued to be an advocate and a friend. And whenever he's on island and I'm on island at the same time, I'll try to see him. It's not very often, but when it happens, it's really lovely. And so the lesson there for me is that, you can't lock people into roles. You have to support their career trajectory, their growth in life.
Yeah, people
and
change.
Sometimes people change. Yeah. Sometimes they make mistakes. Honor the time you're together and wish them well. And it's clear if it's not a good fit, which it wasn't at the very end because I wanted to move to Boulder, back to Boulder, I should add. I even offered to open the Boulder office of that real estate brokerage. He wasn't having it, and I don't blame him. But I just respect that's a real mentor, and a mentor that turns into a friend. And those people are rare in life, and so I want to just honor that as well. That my behavior was not very good as a 29-year-old or whatever, and his behavior as a 50-year-old was just exemplary and continues to be. Yeah,
it was kind of him to have that grace, It's good you guys are still on good terms. That's my previous job doesn't sound like the right description for it, but I'm still on really good terms with Chris, and he's stoked to see me continue to flourish and just maintains a friend and positive attitude, which is really cool. It's always a little worrying if you lose the people that you also worked with, when you kind of take the next step in life. Yeah. So, I don't know, where are we on, we're almost an hour in. I was worried that we wouldn't be warmed up, but now we're chatting.
Wouldn't fill it?
Yeah.
Now we're chatting away. Well, I think we can safely move from professional to the non-personal or people we actually don't know category. And hopefully continue to illustrate the values of why we do what we do and how we think about it. Because I think and it's okay if you don't choose us as your agents or your brokerage, but when you're evaluating the agents out there and you're thinking about hiring somebody, it's really a trusted relationship, and you're spending an enormous amount of money. Often is the largest investment that most people make in a lifetime is real estate assets. And so choose to work with people that aren't bullshitting you, people whose values reflect your own, people that own it when they make mistakes, and people who you can have frank and honest conversations with. And if it feels like they're selling you, they probably are, and their own interests probably outweigh their value to you. As an advisor, and realtors are supposed to have a fiduciary responsibility, although very few could probably even define what that means.
Yeah.
And so ask good questions and choose your advisor in real estate very carefully.
In school in real estate class, there's the fiduciary responsibility thing, but I think that's in one agent's ear out the other, really quick. It means so much more, and there's also like legal weight to it. So I don't know how people ignore it, but that keeps me.
They do.
Yeah,
they do. So this is we can add this to the list of interview questions
Yeah.
that we've talked about. And if you're interviewing an agent, ask them, please tell me what it means to be a fiduciary. Or what is your fiduciary responsibility to me? And if they look panicked and they can't answer this question succinctly, then you know they have no idea what their moral and ethical obligations are to you. And I often wonder...
Or they flunked their class and somehow got their license anyway.
The pass rate is... But I wonder about this when I see people push their buyers into paying hundreds of thousands over list on a home that doesn't deserve it. And we saw that in the bubble, and now we see the flip side. It wasn't really a bubble, but it was definitely a frenzy. And now we see the flip side where some of these people have tried to come back to market and are hundreds of thousands below what they bought. They're just giving up huge amounts of money to get out of these houses. So be careful out there.
And there are some we can't wait to talk about when they're done.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We'll talk about when the deal closes because we can't talk about active listings, except in the newsletter that is now a couple of months behind. But as Hamish well knows, it's because clients come first.
Yeah.
And sometimes family comes first too, for sure. And I just got back from sibling vacations, so it's not always clients that are keeping me from newsletter writing, but I have 12 nieces and nephews I'm trying to build relationships with. So they
Quite
come
a
first.
few, man. That's quite a
versus the anonymous newsletter readers that are out there. And if you really want advice, by the way, move up into the client slot, pick up the phone and call us, and I'm happy to devote time and energy. In fact, this whole podcast today is delayed by about 45 minutes because I was on the phone with a buyer that is seriously thinking about writing an offer. So,
hey, should we pivot, move, perhaps?
Let's pivot.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the last of our mentors and role model categories, and that's the non-personal. And Hamish, do you want to lead this one off, or do you want me to?
I'm looking at mine and it's blank. I'm sure I'll come up with some as you bring it up.
No,
but
really?
Yeah.
Well, okay. So the reason I have this category in here is that maybe 15 or 20 years ago, through some exercise, I can't remember what class or what group of people this exercise was proposed, or maybe I made it up, but it was basically to create an imaginary board of advisors. And I had a real board of advisors, like the people I would call when I was facing kind of a weighty decision. And those people were really helpful in making the right choice. And I was often surprised by the feedback I would get. And they typically were much older, men and women, a handful of people that I would call when I was facing kind of a challenging choice. But this non-personal, like people I actually don't know, this imaginary board of advisors was composed of people that are authors and investors and writers that I really respect and who have had dramatic influence on me. And most recently, it's somebody like Ray Dalio and his big cycles, as well as his principles. There's two things I really appreciate about that guy, and I think he's authentic. I have never met this billionaire myself, but I've heard him on podcasts, I've read his books, and I pay very close attention to his principles that he shares and elucidates on, and as he's entering the last phases of his professional life. Like, what did he learn? And one of the most important things that I learned about what he learned is that he writes it down. He actually has been working on a list of principles for his whole, I don't know, maybe his whole professional life, most of it. But he inspired me to create my own. I have my own list of ethics that I adhere to or do my best to adhere to, and principles that I make decisions from. And every time I learn something new or I have a traumatic experience that was not what I expected, I go back to that list and I ask, well, what did I learn? And what's new here that I can write down? And so and that's one thing he says too, is don't trust my list of principles. You got to write your own. And I have been ever since that idea was expressed. And at least a few times a year, I go back to that list of principles. I go back to my list of ethics, the code of conduct I have for how I behave in the world.
And
I just want to think about it because life constantly throws you curveballs, and sometimes it's not clear what you should do.
Have you ever had to update them or tweak them or change them?
Constantly. Yeah. I'm constantly updating.
They're all in Google Docs. That's the right answer. Right? Yeah. Oh yeah, because especially when things go sideways, afterward I'm like, what did I do? Right? It's very easy to blame the other side, but it's more challenging to take ownership.
And there's always some element of ownership in every situation that went right and that went wrong. Some people are very prone to taking ownership in everything right, whether or not they're even the ones responsible, right?
Everyone knows that kid in class.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Everyone knows that kid in class. Everyone's had that boss. But it's easy to take ownership over what you wasn't really your idea, but it's harder and more important to take ownership of failures. And so taking ownership of failures for me is in the postmortem is to reflect on what I could have done differently and where I fell off the path of these ethics and these values, these principles, and then edit them. So they're all in Google Docs. And one thing I do is I change at the top there's a date, last edited,
last revised,
last reviewed, and last revised, because they're constantly a work in progress. I don't think I'll ever publish these things, but I'm happy to personally walk you through them if you're that curious. But again, I think it's more important to write your own than care about what mine are.
Yeah. And I've still yet to do it. So I really ought to sit down and do that at some point. But, okay, you got Ray Dalio in there.
Okay, Ray Dalio, that's one.
For you, who else you got? No?
For me? You want more from me? I'll do one more. Well, I've got a lot, right? So I loved learning about Buffett when I was in my MBA program and value investing. I really loved learning about a benchmark, that intrinsic value as a concept, not just for investments, but other things. So I don't know about his other approaches to life, but I definitely love the buy it for life perspective. Mm-hmm. Like you're investing it not with a holding period. Mm-hmm. You're investing it because you want to own this asset.
Which I think is the right mindset.
With real estate assets, it's been very strong for me that, like, what's your holding period? My answer has been till I die. Like, I'm buying this asset because it's an asset I want to own for life. Mm-hmm. So it's in the right location. It's in the right street. It's walkable or strollable or whatever language you want to use. It's really a solid long-term investment.
Yeah.
And I could live there, and I'll be proud to be a landlord of this asset because I know it's a really great house. So Buffett was definitely influential. Never met him, of course, just through his books and I don't think I've ever heard him on a podcast, but he's given talks.
Yeah, he's more of a talker.
And of course, there have been lots of lots of stories, lots of biographies have been made on Buffett. So he has had a pretty big impact from an investment perspective. And here's a curveball. This is the last one. Then we're going to move on because you're being very tight about.
I'm trying to think. I just wrote down one name, but it's not a good one.
All right. Okay? If you don't want to talk about it, I'm not going to force you.
I'll talk about it. I'm setting expectations.
Right. Well, here's my curveball. And my curveball has been Oprah Winfrey. Starting in the 80s when I started watching her show at like after school or whatever, like the level like of her interviewing skills and the variety of people that she chose to have on and to allow her platform eventually to highlight has been phenomenal. And she's made big mistakes too. She's had some crazy nut jobs that she's given a platform to. But for the most part, I think she's been a dramatic force for good, and the spiritual side of her worldview has had a big influence on me. And in some ways, it comes back to decision making, right? We've talked about Dalio, and we've talked about Buffett. So here's the third leg of the decision making triangle for me, and it's right out of Oprah Winfrey's lexicon, and it's a phrase that actually comes from Maya Angelou, and it's all about the whole body yes. And if you don't feel a whole body yes, the answer should be no.
Yeah.
And so when you're evaluating major choices in investments or in people, right? Now, I'm not talking about just business relationships, or maybe even romantic relationships. If it's not a whole body yes, you should probably honor that the default answer should be no. Mm-hmm. And so that I think about a lot. And of course, the last piece is when someone shows you who they are.
Believe them the first time.
Believe them the first time. And that is 100% from some Oprah show, which also might be Maya Angelou. Or maybe that one's Maya Angelou. I think that one is Maya. Not the whole body yes. Yeah, that one's Maya and not the whole body yes. But holy cow, that is just time and time again Where it goes sideways is when I expect people to be something they're not.
Mm-hmm.
And they've shown me they're not that, and yet I'm still hoping and praying and wishing that this person's gonna be something they're not. And they're not. They've shown you who they are. You're the one that, it's that Taylor Swift song, I'm the problem, it's me. I'm the one that can't see reality. You've shown me who you are.
Yeah.
So
why am I surprised?
Yeah, exactly.
I've tried to think of people that I've maybe watched grow up, or kind of that I don't know personally, and I've seen kind of how they've navigated through life or have done their things in life, and I know there's a bunch, but I don't have any really off the top of my head as far as a model. It's tough. I wrote down Andy Samberg, but I just more like him as an actor, right?
He's funny.
His Harvard.
Funny.
He did a speech for Harvard, and it was really good and full of some fun advice and pretty funny as well. For a graduating class a couple years back, it's on YouTube. But and then he's got his Lonely Island music troupe and Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Saturday Night Live and everything. He's a creator through and through, but I like seeing that. But he also isn't the type of person that shares life values or advice or anything, so it's not necessarily I get much of a role model experience from him,
I feel that way about McConaughey.
Yeah.
And I would not recommend reading this book, but listening to Green Lights on Audible was really enjoyable. And his philosophy is very simple. It's the title of the book. But holy cow, he's really funny.
Yeah.
I would not call him a role model or
Right.
a mentor, but I really like the guy because of his attitude of dust it off, and I like that his brother is nicknamed Rooster. That just makes me laugh. It makes me smile.
Not sponsored, but the audiobook right now is $10. So hey, I might end up doing
buy it.
Yeah.
Go buy the audiobook. I mean, I'll pay you if you want the $10. It's enjoyable.
If we're getting into
great
it,
for a road trip.
I don't have a budget for
road trip.
books. I've got a budget for most things in life, but books can be without a budget. Yeah.
All right.
You're good. And
All right,
$10.
so that's it for our topic du jour.
Yes.
Let's move on to the other real estate topics. Sound good?
Yeah, something I don't
Market
somber,
conditions.
sobering, real opportunity awaits. How do we want to?
I mean, if you're a seller sitting on the market waiting for a buyer, this is sobering news, maybe. But if you're a buyer that has not found the right house and is feeling frustrated, this is, encouraging news.
Yeah.
So basically, in a nutshell, and I'm not going to go into the specific numbers because June was a month ago, but the June market was in the city of Boulder. So let me back up. As an analyst by training, I want to do this same analysis for Denver, for the city of Boulder, for Boulder County, for Louisville, Lafayette, Longmont, Superior. And then you could drill down to all these neighborhoods. You could do specific neighborhood level analyses. So the market can have a lot of variability right down to the street level. But at the same time, you have to be able to talk about market conditions in a way that is meaningful and makes sense. And right now, after looking at the data for the city of Boulder, I'm seeing just over 20% of the market under contract for single-family houses, which is a phenomenal turnaround from a few years ago. And for many years, I have been saying a balanced market has about 6 months of inventory, and that is coming from an economist rule of thumb. Well, we finally have reached a little over 5 months of inventory, and at this point, I'm willing to say pretty clearly the market is balanced, that buyers have a lot of selection, particularly at the high end of the market. And for the first time in a long time, they have leverage to negotiate better deals. So selection and leverage, particularly at the high end. So buyers, if you are shopping, now is the time to put in aggressive but lower offers and try to get a better deal done for yourself and take advantage of all the selection you have and that you wouldn't have had a few years ago. Now, if you're looking at the low end, the entry level, or you're looking at what we call turnkey properties that have been updated and are really ready to move in without a lot of deferred maintenance, your options are far more limited, but still you have way more than you had years before, and you finally have potentially the opportunity to negotiate a better deal. So that's the takeaway from a quick and dirty market analysis I did before we started this podcast.
And of course, if you want something more detailed or tailored to your specific situation, pick up the phone. Give Osman a call.
Yeah, if you are not working with somebody else.
Yeah, that's key.
If you are working with one of my competitors, I'm sorry, I advise our clients, but I will advise it with data, and we'll do a live video call. This won't be, I'll get back to you in a few hours. Let's just do it live. And if we need to, we'll dump it into a spreadsheet, and it'll be very specific to your unique property or your unique property search. Because data is really what's happening, and everything else is just how people feel about the market. And feels are not what's actually happening.
There's a really catchy phrase about feelings and facts, but I don't really like the guy. Yeah. So, anyways.
I don't know. Dangerous quote, Hamish? Are you?
Yeah, no, we're good.
Quoting somebody inappropriate.
Somebody controversial. So carrying on.
Okay, let's not quote controversial figures.
Yeah. Well, it's time for some shameless self-promotion.
Great. Let's move on to shameless self-promotion.
Almost cue in some elevator music or like mall music in the background.
Mall music. Yeah. Well, look, this is right out of Car Talk, right? Shameless self-promotion. This 100% are from our buyers and sellers. This is what's going on in the world. And we have a new Table Mesa listing coming up that has incredible views. I would call this house turnkey.
Yep.
They've done incredible work, and none of it was done as a flip. We have not finalized pricing. My guess is, I don't want to throw out a number.
Yeah, just good price.
Because it's so unique. It's priced really well for what it is, but it is turnkey, and it is toward the mid to upper end of the Table Mesa marketplace. Definitely. And it is extremely rare in its view quality and extremely rare in its turnkey nature. And in about a week or two, I'll actually be able to mention the address. But for right now, all I can do is tell you it's coming, and this is your heads up.
Be excited.
To be excited, right. Okay, so moving on from that one, we can talk about a listing that just fell apart, a deal that just fell apart. We had our condo at 1380 Rosewood was on the market, and it was under contract with a buyer that unfortunately just wasn't that serious. They terminated on a bunch of nonsense. They did not issue an objection. We had no opportunity to potentially correct the issues. And in discussion with what's the actual problem, the buyer's agent shared what their concerns were, and all of them were the most superficial nonsense, all of which could have been addressed. And so it's unfortunate, but this is a risk that sellers face. It's a real risk. It is a known risk. The real estate contracts do not protect sellers from this. And these are buyers that aren't really serious but want to tie up a property till they get serious. And they don't really know they don't really know how nice 1380 Rosewood is compared to everything else under 600. Okay. There's almost nothing. It's usually in a busy location, or it has a lot of deferred maintenance, or it's surrounded by students. You're in a student slum. I probably shouldn't use that term. It might be derogatory, but I'm going to use it. You're like completely living in like student density, in wood frame construction. The kids are partying right next door.
Or smoking.
That's your options. And none of that is 1380 Rosewood is like perfect for the grandparent property that wants to have a place to call home and visit their grandkids here. It's perfect for young professionals that just need 2 bedrooms and a garage and want to be in a neighborhood that is not student infested. And it's got great professional services nearby. It's got great retail that's just getting better. All that liquor store jankiness is going away in the next few years.
A lot of planned development.
Museum.
Yeah.
And please go walk into the library and check it out. I finally did, and I was blown. Hamish, I was blown away.
Oh, I gotta check it out. I'll be there today.
The biggest concern has been, it's going to become a magnet for homeless people. They're going to be encamped outside. None of that's true. And I saw zero homelessness hanging out outside the library. I mean, granted, that could change, whatever. But if you walk in there right now, when I walked in, it was all people using the library as the library was intended to be used, which are young people reading books, using the Wi-Fi to work on their laptops. There were classes. There's all sorts of stuff going on there, and the building is really unique and interesting from an architectural perspective. It's a cool library. I got to say, it's an asset, and I had been nervous about it being an asset, and now I'm very proud to say it's a huge plus for the neighborhood.
That's wicked.
So go check out the new library.
Yeah, I plan to. I will. You said you sold me.
All right, our last one I want to talk about. Well, actually, I guess we could talk about two more, and then we'll talk about them pretty quickly.
Okay.
We have a listing up in Golden in Coal Creek Canyon, on Spruce Canyon's Circle, 11851. I'm going on memory. That particular property is rare in the fact that it has a carriage house. It's very well made. It's sitting in a beautiful aspen glen, and it's a lovely family-style mountain property that is very functional with outbuildings and plenty of land.
Carriage house.
It's really
Or is it carriage house?
that carriage
Sleep
house.
out? Yeah.
Yeah, it's got the apartment above it. It's a cool spot. And so mountain properties are a little slow at the moment, and they've decided to go ahead and cut the price. So they just dropped the price about 50 grand. And if you are out there shopping and you look at, okay, what properties would you actually be willing to buy, right? There are currently about 9 competitors. And of these 9, this property is priced really well given its many positive attributes. And if you're out there shopping, you should go take a look at it. If you're looking for that mountain getaway property that's in close proximity to Golden, to Denver,
Boulder.
to Netherland,
Yeah.
And Boulder,
Well,
of course,
through
it's sort of
yeah.
midway between all of these things. It's a great property, so it's worth a look for sure.
Absolutely. And then the rest are missing from the show notes. So what do you have?
I have one more, 605 Alpine.
Oh, yeah.
So we recently took this property off the market, and it's really unfortunate. I mean, basically, one of the primary potential buyers of this property are people that are looking for future upside, people that want to build a newer, modern home, and are looking for the right parcel and the right platform. And so historically, the best platform to build a newer, modern house without scraping it is the ranch-style property that is north-south oriented. And the ranch-style house is a box on a box, right? It's a box for the foundation basement. It's a box for the first level. And then you could build a potential third level with that, or second
Stack
level,
it.
with the third box on
Yeah.
top. Right, you could stack it. It's the easiest structure to do that on. A lot of architects want to start fresh because you could do exactly what you want then. But there are literally hundreds, maybe thousands of examples of pop tops throughout Boulder. I
there's
used to
so
actually
many.
have a pop top map
You do.
of all of the pop tops, all of the creativity that you can do with this style of house. And you really want north-south oriented. And this property is at the south end of Newlands with virtually backyard access into North Boulder Park. And it has a 2-car garage. Like, it has all of these things, a sizable 2-car garage with a giant loft on top. It has all of these things, plus the Tesla roof and the power
As
wall.
is.
Like,
Yeah.
and that's how it is now. And so this is like perfect for a young professional couple to want to lock this down. And when rates come back down, maybe that's the opportunity to take out a construction loan and build your dream house. But until then, you've got something that generates tons of power through the Tesla roof, has been put in the Tesla
20 outages,
wall
right?
is over 20 outages is what our seller told
Yeah.
us, that this property has kept the power on through 20 outages. It's a cool property. It's in a great spot. And we just pulled it off the market because we're not really seeing the response we want. And the sellers are not feeling desperate. And so they're like, let's just rent it till the market comes back in the spring. So that's our current thinking. It's currently withdrawn. And it is for rent, but it certainly is for buy too. So if you've been thinking about this property, now's the time, and I'm happy to give you a tour of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to check it out for rent, perhaps you're in the market to rent, it's on Zillow, 605 Alpine Ave. Yeah.
There you go.
Okie dokie. Well, we've got 4 sales of the week, and the first one is your deal, Oz.
Our deal.
Well,
Hamish.
yeah. Our family.
So we'll talk about 490 Erie. So this property just closed on Friday. And first thing I want to do is give the sell side a tip of the hat. The listing agent was Janet Leap. And Janet was so professional throughout the entire transaction. Great communication.
Accommodating.
When she... accommodating within reason,
Yeah.
right? And also while protecting her client. And there's some uniqueness to this particular deal that I don't necessarily want to go into too much detail because there's privacy concerns, but I will say that when she was late to respond to something, she always apologized and said, sorry, it took me a while to get back to you. That sort of professional courtesy, you believe it or not, is actually a little rare. She has great communication. I really enjoyed working with her throughout that transaction. And she accommodated a number of our buyers' requests that were not typical, and worked with sellers that are not local in a home that has not traded hands in like 40 years or something like that.
Yeah.
So maybe even longer. This might be the original owner's family of this particular property in Fraser Meadows. But let me give you the deal notes. So it's a large rambling ranch built in 1960 with a 3-car garage and on a true double lot. Like it's 3/4 of an acre. And when I say double, I mean by today's code double.
Yeah.
Not the make-believe double you see in Newlands and Mapleton Hill, triple lot. None of that's true. This is actually subdividable, and we went down the rabbit hole to verify it for the buyer, give them as much evidence as we could that this is actually true. I don't think they're actually going to subdivide it, much to the sadness of developers and much to the appreciation of the neighbors. But you could. So this particular property, when you look at it, even if you remove the original house and say each lot's worth $750, $775, that's dirt value. For Fraser Meadows, and ending up with 2 potentially very large buildable lots sometime in the future. That's not their intention, but that's sort of the backup plan. That's the long-term vision, maybe someday. But for now, the owners that we represented, the buyers, are going to enjoy this property. We did back pat for us. We negotiated, let's do the math.
We could say considerable.
Well, we negotiated 8% off of list, right? So $150,000 off of the list price. So, when I see a negotiated bottom line that ends up more than our commission, in my mind, that is such a win. Like I love negotiation, but I always want to justify our value as buyer's agents. Always as agents, sellers agents too. Mm-hmm. But when I see this happening, right, when I was able to get them that big of a negotiated discount, that feels really good for legitimate reasons that came up. But it could have gone to a builder and it didn't. And we ended up getting a very good price for the buyer. And I think the seller got a good deal too. The house had a lot of deferred stuff going on. But I feel really good about how we represented the buy side, how we negotiated on inspection, and I deeply appreciate the professionalism of the listing agent. So
yeah, absolutely.
It all worked out. We had some interesting due diligence because the neighbor in the back had been driving a landscaping truck to access their backyard, and we were through the yard of this property. And I was like, there's very clearly tire tracks going to the neighbor's house. Let's go meet them. And our client felt a little uncomfortable doing it. I'm like, well, I can go with you. And she took me up on it. So we went over to the neighbor's house, knocked on the door and said, hi, we're buying 490 Erie and we noticed that your landscaper's driving through. You want to tell us about what that's like? She's like, oh, it's just this one time. It's not like an easement or anything. I'm like, perfect, because that's okay.
Yeah, so we needed to know.
We noticed you put a gate back there for future access, so we want to understand this. And she reassured our client that that's not their intention, is to try to get some sort of land grab, some sort of not eminent domain, but what's it called? Adverse possession over that land. Because that was our concern, and she alleviated that. And that's part of due diligence. So that's one aspect of this deal that is not public, but really important to dot your I's, cross your T's, and do your due diligence when you see something going on. And so we did that for this buyer, and I think they're very happy. You were at closing, Hamish.
Yeah, it was a nice closing, and yeah, they were super stoked.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the tale of 490 Erie.
I also,
and then,
a small little note, I love Fraser Meadows. The neighborhood's just super peaceful, quiet, and nice. And then I love the sunken living room. Granted, the house is a little dated, but I think that needs to come back as a feature.
Yeah. Oh, you mean that mid-century kind of style?
And, the living room's like a step or two down. I love that. Just little things.
I have mixed feelings about that. But, okay. So let's talk about the other two, and we'll kind of hit these pretty quickly so we don't delay this podcast anymore. So 516 Maxwell, this property hit the market a little over a month ago. It hit the market May 24th. And it was available for over 2 weeks. So for 2 weeks, you could have seen this house and negotiated a deal on it. And let me back up. So Maxwell, this particular house is in the historic district, the 500 block of Maxwell Avenue. I really like Maxwell Avenue because it's not Mapleton. It doesn't get the traffic that running through to the Academy. It doesn't get the randoms as much as Mapleton does. Maxwell is a really, really quiet street. And one of our first listings 15 years ago was only a few houses away. And so I got to know this location really well and appreciate it for what it is. And this particular house, built pre-1900, 3,600 square feet, lots of updates that are in line with its historic character, had 4 bedrooms, 5 baths, the all-important garage, but not a single garage, a 2-car garage, which is really hard to do in Mapleton Hill. All of those things this home had. And so the buyer locked it down with a decent discount, $250 below list. So I don't know what that is. Let's do the math. So that's a 3.1% discount from the list price. Not horrible for a home that had only been on the market a couple of weeks. A little over 3% below list. No other disclosed concessions, closed in cash. And if I have time, when I get the next newsletter out, I'll talk about 516 Maxwell in more detail because it is a historic home and there's a lot of information on historic homes available at the Carnegie Library through Historic Boulder. And this asset, this particular real estate asset, if you just look at the photos, it is so well presented. It is so nicely preserved and updated in thoughtful ways that are in line with historic character that don't try to turn it into this modern house with an exterior that's historic. It's beautiful.
It really is.
So hat tip for the buyer for buying just an absolutely gorgeous property that's also functional and has been updated for modern living in one of my favorite blocks of historic Mapleton Hill.
One note for us on the marketing front is look how many of these photos are vertical, or and I think it works really well for this type of house.
I mean, that's a really important point, Hamish, but it's a mix of vertical and horizontal. Mm-hmm. And also what's interesting is how often they just don't care about the MLS rules. Yeah. So the MLS has certain
guidelines,
size constraints. Yeah. And we typically adhere to them, but I don't think you need to because when these properties flow through to Zillow and Redfin, all the white bars disappear anyway. Mm-hmm. So... but this is not the standard dimensions that the thin white bar in the photos. We'll have to take a closer look at what they did with that. But you're right. A mix of horizontal and vertical photos is the right answer for the MLS. And these photos are very well done. I mean, there's a few I would make some minor modifications. Like when you have, like if you look at the kitchen photo, for example, and you have that bench, right, that little side table, it makes it look, because they use such a wide angle lens, it makes it look so uncomfortably big. It takes up so much of the real estate of the photo. It probably would have been better to angle this slightly and crop it in, but
no, good eye for that.
Artistic differences.
No, yeah, but sure.
When you see distortion in the photo of something that's a normal everyday object, that's not a good thing. You don't really want. Like if you look at the pool table photo that's vertical on the bottom, it's not wide angle, and the pool table looks normal. Yeah. Yep. I like the detail work and the stonework too. I mean, there's so much about this house that's just like, I don't know about the snake head.
I think it's
gutters.
A little bit of whimsy, some levity, right?
I mean, are they Hufflepuff or they're definitely Slytherin?
I have no idea.
When you put snakes on the gutters. But that is a style of gutter, by the way, that doesn't require downspouts. So this is a gutter that slings the water out. And I've seen those in action, and they actually, I mean, they don't require the cleaning of normal gutters. And if you can make sure that the water is falling far enough from the foundation, you're golden. Cool. So there's ways, you could put like hardscape, like a concrete landing pad.
So it shoots off, or
there's so much
on a cliff, or anything,
Right.
Yeah.
It's not, you don't need the metal gutter downspout going down. But anyway, very cool house. So much important. Like, I love the mix of detail shots.
Yeah.
And here's what the space looks like. They nailed it. So despite the fact I've never heard of this agent before, no offense, agent, I think your photographer killed it, and the staging looks great. Good work.
Very well marketed.
And I may cover a little more detail on this one, but it may be worth noting in the newsletter. It may be worth noting 1280 a square, and a typical size lot, and a north. Oh, I'm sorry. Is it north? No, it's on the 5th Street corner. So it is a north facing house. Yeah. So not even south facing, and they got to that number. So well done.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you should expect to pay for Mapleton Hill for a house that's very livable and turnkey.
Yeah, that's a really compelling one. So we went from historic, and now we're doing a quick over to, what is this, 2024 year built. Jumping right over. This one is 5220 2nd Street, Boulder, North Boulder. Osmond? Yeah.
Thank you for keeping us moving. It's actually Dakota Ridge.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're interested in Dakota Ridge, I did a whole video on the pros and cons of Dakota Ridge. I think that video might be 4 years old at this point, but all of the content is evergreen. You'll find it on our YouTube channel, and that'll cover the pros and cons of this location. And there are some significant ones that you should think about, particularly with respect to fire risk. But this is a type of real estate product that is very much in demand, and that is a brand new turnkey house with open space views, and a home that is reasonably or maybe even generous for Boulder sized, 4,400 square feet, 3 bedrooms on the upper, 1 in the basement, 4 bathrooms, a 3-car garage, smaller than typical lot, but that's what you should expect to see in Dakota Ridge, and it's a net zero house. So when you look at the photos, you see, I mean, it's just spectacular, right? It's modern. It is on the corner. No one's going to put a house in that blocks your view, and it's just is a home that has the wow factor. Now, when it comes to design, I will say something about modern houses, and that my personal preference is for historic and traditional design, because I feel like there's a warmth to that, and there's also a long-term investment acknowledgement by the market that this is
of value.
Like historic.
Yeah.
Well, historic. I mean, the easiest way to say this is that historic homes don't ever get dated.
Oh, yeah, like a timelessness to them.
That's the word. They're timeless. But a modern home, in 20 years, I mean, look back on what was modern 20 years ago. There's now a mid-century, acknowledgement that that's another generation of homes, but only if they have classic mid-century elements to them. And that's not just because they were built in the 1950s. They need a central fireplace. They need transom windows. They need all sorts of things that define mid-century design. And modern homes are stunning, and this one absolutely is. There's no argument. There's enhanced fire risk for being so close to the wildland-urban interface, which is going to cost you a pretty penny on insurance. But that goes with the territory of buying a home that is right up against open space. And that North Boulder sub-community plan is going to continue to improve the location. And it's a spectacular property. So it listed brand new April 12th. It was available for more than a month before somebody locked it down. When they finally finished up with the process, they ended up $100,000 over the original list price. But almost certainly that $100,000 was in finishes, right? They chose to spend a little more money on certain things to make the home theirs. So that's not uncommon with new build. One thing you do want to watch out for in new build, and this is like a quick due diligence tip for our buyers, is that new build often comes with what's called a builder contract. So the seller does not want you to use the standard contract to buy and sell from the real estate commission, because that contract protects the buyer. Instead, they have an attorney draft up a contract that protects them, the builder. And you should be really careful going that route, because a lot of the protections afforded to you are now gone. And once you give them your earnest money, you're probably never seeing it back. It doesn't mean that you're buying a fraudulent product or a diminished product. You should just know what you're getting into.
You can still have an agent, during.
You could still have an agent represent you. And in this particular case, here's the thing. It's an LLC, okay, that's selling it to you. So now they've limited their liability to the assets in the LLC. So the questions you want to ask are also things like, who's the builder? What's the reputation of the builder? Have they been in this market for 30 years? Will they back up their work with a solid warranty? And what's their post-closing process for a brand new home? Like, in a month, can I do a punch list with blue tape? If the answers are no, what you see is what you get, and your phone calls go to an LLC that no longer exists, then you're potentially at risk. But overall, this home is pretty visually stunning, appears to be very nice and very turnkey, and is at $700 a square for Dakota Ridge. So a nice benchmark for what you should expect. Turnkey, brand new construction of this size, abutting open space with these features like 3-car garage, good layout. What you should expect to pay for that in Dakota Ridge going forward.
Yeah, it's a really pretty. I think we said striking when we were scouting them out. It's a striking home. Yeah.
Striking homes. Hamish, we're at 90 minutes.
I know. It seems to be what we be doing these days, but no complaints. We're great on time, for the rest of today's requirements, and I think we're gonna pretty solid.
Do you have any parting thoughts?
I wanted to do something poignant about like mentorship or role models.
I mean, I think it's really important to pause every now and then and reflect on whose shoulders you stand on, and humble yourself, thinking it's all about you.
Yeah.
And also to commit to paying it forward when you recognize that you benefit from the wisdom, care, teaching, stewardship, concern, service of so many that came before you. And that's the take home for me, is to pay it forward when you recognize all the benefits you are privileged to have received in your life. And I'm so grateful for those people, and that is the DNA of what drives our mission at House Einstein. But I think the only way you get to those moments is when you pause to reflect. And sometimes death is a really important reminder to pause and reflect on someone's life and their impact on you. And the most important thing and the best thing I think you can do in honor of those people is, pay it forward. See those values continue to flourish in the world.
Yeah, big time. Good point.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for the House Einstein podcast. We deeply appreciate you joining us today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching it on YouTube. Thank you for all the private comments that people continue to give us about the podcast. Thanks for your patience for the last few weeks. It wasn't out. I had sibling events and other things came up. Clients came up. And so 3 weeks ago was our last recorded podcast.
We're back.
Normally we are a weekly deal.
Yep.
But we're back for at least a few weeks. And if you'd like to learn more about us, you could find us at houseeinstein.com. Please do subscribe to our newsletter. And in the next couple of weeks, you'll see a brand new website unfold. We're super excited to reveal that. And I hope you're all well out there in real estate land. Thank you so much for listening.
And stay cool. It is a toasty one. All right. Take care.
Take care.